Hello and welcome to another episode of the Other Ranting Atheist. Yes, I'm not the only one out there, and I'm really happy about that. So what I'll be ranting about today? Well, I'm on my way to work, and after about 30 minutes of ranting in my head, I realized, hey, since I left the house late, and I'm gonna be late for work, let me just spend the time doing a video, which I wanted to do yesterday, but got another one yesterday, but I never got around to it, so. I want to rant about apologetics today and how apologists themselves are sort of like, well, they are literally God's defense attorneys. That's their whole job. Their job is to defend their client, which is God. Now, of course, I'm sure that the apologists see God as innocent, and so they're defending his innocence. But the funny thing about defense attorneys is that it doesn't matter if the person that they're defending is innocent or not. The job of the defense attorney is to defend their client. That's their job. Whether or not the client is actually innocent is besides the point, and that's exactly how apologists work. It doesn't matter to them if their client, God, is innocent or not. Their job as apologists is to defend them, and that's exactly what they do, no matter what. Which is why you'll notice that they're always coming up with different defenses for the things that they can defend. You know, there are things that they can't defend no matter what because their logic always falls short, especially when it comes to things like the Trinity, because the Trinity is nonsensical in nature. You can't make sense of it. So they might try as using analogies like with the egg, the three parts, and other things, but it never really works because the Trinity in and of itself is a nonsensical concept. But when it comes to things that can be made sense of, they're always trying to refine their arguments and make sense of their their defending. But all in all, it comes down to the same thing no matter what. And I've been listening lately to Deconstruction Zone on YouTube, and he's having conversations with Christians, debates with Christians, and it's the same thing. Whether you're listening to Deconstruction Zone or you're listening to uh, Taco on when it comes to him talking to presuppositional apologists, or whether you're speaking to, or whether you're listening to others who have conversation with Christians, or the atheist experience, or Matt Dillahunt. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. Christians try Christians try to make it seem like their position is logical. But it's not that they actually believe that their position is logical. They're using logic for people who require logic. So in their own circles, they're not using logic because logic isn't required. They're just um, relying on faith, relying on personal experience. Because when you're in a circle of people who believe the same thing that you do, for the same reasons, that's all you need. But when it comes to everybody outside of that, it's not necessarily non-Christian, but even also to other Christians denominations who they believe to be false, then they rely on logic and they rely on reason. Now I put logic and reason in quotes because it's not that their position is actually logical, but they're trying to make it seem like the position is logical. And you'll see this all the time with apologists like Sean McDowell or um, Frank Turek. They'll always try to make it seem like that position is logical, and because these people have a certain sense of what's the word? They're very the word escapes me, but they're very appealing. They're very I can't remember the word, but they're very appealing. They have a certain aura about them that makes it seem like they know what they're talking about, even when they don't. You especially see this with Frank Turek. He speaks as if he knows what he's talking about. You hear his debates when he's talking about slavery and how the Bible doesn't endorse slavery, but if you actually pay attention to his arguments, you'll realize that it falls short. And this is something that you'll see with all apologetics. When you pay attention, when you do a deep dive into the arguments, you'll realize that it falls short. It doesn't matter what they're defending. That's always the case. But the reason why it falls short is because ultimately it's not about using logic to convince you. So what you'll realize is that people who use these apologetics as a reason for why they believe, or just to defend their position, it makes sense to them, but ultimately it's intuitive. It's not logical. And so they're using these arguments to try to convince other people. But it's not because they actually believe that it's logical. They just want something to defend. This is in line with, um, what's it called? First Peter, I think. I think it's First Peter chapter 1. Or First Peter chapter 3, it might be. That talks about always being prepared to give an answer for the hope that you have, the belief that you have. But notice that it doesn't say always be prepared to give a good answer, because it's not about giving good answers. It's just about giving an answer. And when it comes down to it, when you give an answer and they always get shot down, and there are specific answers or defenses that apologists use that do get shot down, ultimately what it comes down to is you shoot down enough of their quote unquote logical arguments. What they'll do is they'll just say they'll go back to the same guilt and shaming language. Well, you just want to sin, or you just want to be your own God, or the Romans 120. You know the truth already. You already know that God exists. You're just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. They'll go to the same old emotional arguments when the quote unquote logical arguments fall apart. Always. There is no exception to this rule. I've listened to so many conversations between Christians, either Christian denominations or Christians or non-Christians, that it's always the same. Always. They'll try to use logical arguments. You shoot them down, then you just want to sin, or you already know the truth, so I'm not going to waste my time with you, or um, you're just a child of the devil, or it's always the same thing. Or they'll they'll just resort to hell. Well, you're gonna burn in hell if you don't repent. Um, Trying to scare you, fear monger you into repentance, which is a common thing that people use because it works. As people, we are definitely afraid of the afterlife, or what could be afterlife, because we don't know. And so the fear mongering of hell really plays into the fear of the unknown. And I kind of went off on a tangent there, but ultimately, what apologetics is about is just defending God. And again, this is separate from whether or not God Himself is defensible. Again, as a defense attorney, your job is to defend your client. This is separate from whether or not your client is defensible. It doesn't matter. Look at even the most deplorable people that we have witnessed in our society. Ted Bundy had a defense attorney. Does it matter that he was a despicable human? It doesn't matter. The job of a defense attorney is to defend your client, and that is separate from whether or not your client is defensible. It doesn't matter. Now, Christians they honestly believe that their client that they're defending is defensible and is innocent, and they'll make that argument, although it always falls flat, always. Because even when you want to make the argument of objective morality, they really don't believe in objective morality. Why? Because their morality isn't objective if God Himself doesn't have to follow it. His law is supreme, supposedly. His law is righteous because, God's nature is righteous, and so because nature is righteous, His laws have to be righteous because His laws have to be in line with His nature. But then that brings up a problem, because if His laws are in line with His nature, and that means that because His nature is righteous, that His laws are righteous, and that means that God is obligated to follow His own laws. Not to say that, well, that means that, God has to do certain things, because the Bible talks about God being able to basically do whatever He wants to do because He's God. Even though Christians don't really believe this, because they always make the argument of God has to punish sin because He's just, and being just involves punishing sin, which is besides the point, especially since there are several instances in the Bible where God doesn't punish sin when they're by His own people, but that's a different story. But that's basically their argument. They don't actually believe what they're saying, and so this is why I personally don't respect apologists, because their job again is to apologize for the text and for their concept of God. Their job is to defend God, and again, this is separate from whether or not God Himself is defensible. Their job is to defend them, and that's what they'll do. It doesn't matter whether or not they actually believe even though I'm convinced that many do, but not all. For them, many of them, it is just a hustle because it's easy to make money when it comes to Christianity. You know, you claim that you're a Christian, you claim that you believe in God, and especially, in the U.S., it's easy to make money that way. So it's not a mystery as to why apologists are into the business of apologizing for their client who is God, because it's it's the very profitable thing to do. You know, you can easily go on different tours and have speaking arrangements and easily make money and make a name for yourself that way. There are many apologists who've done this, so it's profitable, of course. But again, and I'm just going to reiterate this point one more time before I end this talk, but apologists, their job is to defend God and to defend the text that is the only source of everything that we know about this God. Because outside of the Bible, even though many Christians claim personal experience, outside of the Bible, we know nothing about the Christian God. Everything that we know about the Christian God comes from the Bible. And so you have to defend the text, which is the only source of knowledge about this God um, that they supposedly live for. And so they defend that because they live for this God. And so that's basically what it is. Their job is to defend their client God, which is separate from whether or not God is defensible. I will make the argument that God isn't defensible, and if you watch people like Deconstruction Zone, you will figure out why. But anyway, I just want to do a quick rant before I head off to work. The video's a little longer than I want it to be. I do apologize for that, but I hope you enjoyed my talk, and I'll see you in the next one.